That is one big pile of shit. This could be it. We may be in some multiverse where I don't even exist.
Don't knock rationalization. Where would we be without it?
Yes, without the use. To take them out, take them down, do your stuff. Life, finds a way.
Hello and welcome to episode 16 of The Complete Works, a deep dive into the career and films of actor Jeff Goldblum. My name is Mike Smith, and joining me on this journey into the wondrous world of Goldblum is my friend, co-host, and fellow Goldblum maniac,
Mike Decrecio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. It's another wonderful day of Goldblum shenanigans that we're about to have. How are you?
Exactly. Doing a good time, having fun, ish. I mean, it's still quarantine times. We're still living in America in 2020, so like things aren't great, but like,
yeah.
And Montana is also in a weird place where it's like, everything's kind of reopening. And we had a run where we weren't really having much coronavirus cases, and now we are having coronavirus cases.
Huh, you reopened and then got new cases? Weird.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Not as bad as New York, from what I understand. I mean, Missoula has gotten a couple of cases here and there. State of Montana as a whole has about 80 active cases. But I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had like 14. So, kind of jumped up more than I think some people were expecting it to. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. And of course, you're in New York where things are crazy all the time.
Yeah. No new update other than it's still real bad. So that's fun. I think Long Island and New York City are entering phase 2, whatever that means. Other than more people will die that don't need to. So that's exciting to think about, But yeah, that's kind of it. Still haven't really left the house. Still working from home. Still watching a lot of movies. And like that's what it's going to be till I'm legally not allowed to.
Fair enough. So you in this time of crisis where we are retreating into our Jeff Goldblum movies and doing this podcast weekly, a few weeks ago, when we talked about 10 Speed and Brown Shoe, we dived into the work of legendary TV producer at the time, Stephen J. Cannell, whose work included creating shows like The Rockford Files, 21 Jump Street, and The A-Team. This week, as we take on yet another early 80s Goldblum TV project, we talk about another couple of people who had already built a reputation for themselves with some classic TV series. That would be Richard Levinson and William Link, two writing partners that would work together on just about everything for many years. They met on their first day of junior high school in 1947 and shared a love of mental challenges and crime fiction, particularly Ellery Queen. They started out working in radio before moving into plays, and then finally primetime TV, where they would essentially go on to define the TV mystery of the week. They created COLUMBO, Mike.
Wow.
Yes. They also created Mannix. They co-created Murder, She Wrote. They even got to make an Ellery Queen TV show based on the character they grew up loving. So they basically did a lot of this kind of stuff in the 70s and 80s. So they had a pretty strong reputation going into the movie we're talking about today, a TV movie written by Levinson and Link, coming a couple of years after Columbo went off the air and just before Murder, She Wrote premiered. It's a classic whodunit that takes the time to analyze the whodunit, and that would be 1982's Rehearsal for Murder. Now, the whodunit is a format that has been starting to see a resurgence in recent years. Kenneth Branagh did his version of Murder on the Orient Express. There was a BBC version of 10 Little Indians. But I think the one that really captured the zeitgeist and will likely spawn a bunch of imitators going forward was Rian Johnson's Knives Out, a movie that I think is surprisingly similar to this one, if only because it's not just a whodunit. It's also sort of opening up the hood and showing us how whodunits work, while also kind of misleading the audience and keeping some surprises in store. Mike, you, of course, are a big fan of Knives Out.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, Rian Johnson, obviously I'm there. Second, like it's got everything going for it. Rian Johnson, whodunit, quirky Daniel Craig character, like I'm there. Sign me up.
Yeah, that was your number one movie of 2019. We've talked about it a lot on our other podcast, Mike Might Go to the Movies. And so you're pretty into Knives Out, and you're a fan of the whodunit genre in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like a good little like whodunit or detective story or some kind of mystery you have to unravel, right?
Sure, definitely. And all that stuff, makes sense. I mean, after overseeing 7 seasons of Columbo, I would imagine the mystery itself becomes less interesting for the writer, and they instead want to focus on how the mystery is told, right? And I think to that end, Rehearsal for Murder engages in a classic whodunit setup. Gather a group of people who all had a connection to someone who died in one location and have one person solving the crime and telling us that someone in this room is the killer, which is pretty much like a line of dialogue that happens in this movie. I believe that's where it cuts to a commercial break right there. And that cast of people that gathers in that room happens to include Jeff Goldblum in this early 80s TV phase of his career. After this, he'd be a pretty major part of the ensemble in a huge movie, and his TV starring roles would become less frequent for a while. He plays Leo Gibbs, an actor who was a part of the stage production that the murder victim was the lead in. The victim herself, Monica Wells, is played by Lynn Redgrave, the sister of Vanessa Redgrave, who appeared in movies like Tom Jones and Georgie Girl back in the 60s. Before her death, Monica was in a relationship with the film's protagonist and writer of the play, Alex Dennison, played by Robert Preston, best known for playing Harold Hill in The Music Man, and who was nominated for an Oscar that same year for his role in Victor Victoria. He gathers the crew together, which includes British actor David Matthews, no relation to Dave Matthews, the singer.
True fans call him Dave.
True fans call him Dave, you're right. Played by Patrick McNee, who was the star of the TV series The Avengers in the 60s, no relation to the Marvel Avengers of the current day. Lloyd Andrews, the director of the show, is played by Lawrence Pressman, best known for his role as the head of the hospital on Doogie Howser. The producer of the show, Walter Lamb, is played by William Daniels, a.k.a. Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World.
What a pleasant delight that was.
Yeah, that was a fun surprise. And Karen Daniels, another actress, is the last of the group. She's played by Madeline Smith, who at this point had been an urban cowboy with John Travolta and would go on to show up in All of Me with Steve Martin and 2010, The Year We Made Contact, which was the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. So from there, you've got Frank Heller, an out-of-work actor played by William Russ, a.k.a. Corey's dad from Boy Meets World. That's right. We have not one, but two Boy Meets World actors in the house, Mike. I mean, that's very exciting.
Yeah, that's pretty strange. Just that these two characters are in this weird, forgotten, made-for-TV movie.
A few years before Boy Meets World went on the air, too, which is also key. Were you a Boy Meets World fan when you were a kid and growing up?
Yeah, but not in a, like, follow it, watch it all the time kind of thing. It was one of those, like, reruns of this are enjoyable sometimes kind of deal, you know?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of in the same boat. I actually was not that big of a Boy Meets World guy. I feel like we're acting very, very excited that there's two Boy Meets World actors in here, and we kind of are, just because it's so weird that they're both in this movie. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost sacrilege to say, because everybody I know who is like I remember when Girl Meets World premiered, which was like the sequel to Boy Meets World on Disney Channel. People I know were freaking out about it. Like, they were so excited for Girl Meets World, which was, a Disney Channel version of Boy Meets World. It was like, I think I saw like 5 minutes of an episode once. I was like, this is terrible. This is really, really bad. But Boy Meets World definitely has its fan base. I wonder what percentage of that fan base has seen this movie, too.
I don't know.
They should make a sequel to this. Rehearsal for Girl Meets World or whatever. I don't know. We'll workshop that. But
Rehearsal to Murder.
Ah, yes. There you go. And then after that, you got the bartender Damon, who's played by John Finnegan, who had a recurring role in Columbo, was also the evil cat from An American Tail. So there's that. The officers on the scene after the murder include Nicholas Mealy, who horror fans might know from his roles in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5, and Charlie Robinson, who was in the main cast of Night Court. And then there's Lieutenant McElroy, who is played by Buck Young at the very end, a veteran actor who was on Gomer Pyle and The Andy Griffith Show. So Rehearsal for Murder, written by Richard Levinson and William Link, and it actually won them an Edgar Award from the Mystery Writers of America for Best Television Feature, which, if you're not familiar with the Edgar Awards, they're named after Edgar Allan Poe. It's about the best in crime and mystery fiction and stuff like that. I don't think they give those awards out anymore. I feel like those have been discontinued in recent years. The movie was directed by David Green, who mostly made TV movies throughout his career. He was one of the directors of Roots back in the 70s. Also did the film adaptation of the musical Godspell. Rehearsal for Murder was coming 3 years after his previous film, Friendly Fire, which was a drama starring Carol Burnett that won an Emmy for Outstanding Directing, and 2 years before his next project, a miniseries called Fatal Vision, starring Gary Cole, Carl Malden, and Eva Marie Saint. So Rehearsal for Murder first aired on CBS on May 26, 1982, as part of their CBS Wednesday night movies. And if you weren't watching it, you could have been watching the Lee Majors TV show The Fall Guy, followed by Dynasty on ABC, or you could have been watching The Facts of Life on NBC, which would have led into a short-lived sitcom called Teachers Only, coincidentally also starring Lynn Redgrave. So there you go. It was a double dose of Lynn Redgrave on May 26th, 1982 on network television. The IMDb plot synopsis for Rehearsal for Murder reads, a year after his fiance's death, a playwright schedules a rehearsal for his new play, which proves to be a trap for her killer. So, Mike, what were your overall thoughts on Rehearsal for Murder?
My overall thoughts on Rehearsal for Murder, kind of, it's fine, you know, like it's solid, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying not, I don't want to sound exactly like I did in the Threshold episode. But it's pretty, like, I mean, it's fun. It's got, like, it's a whodunit, and that's on its base level is good. Like, I enjoy that for the most part. So, like, I'm already pretty much in. And like, yeah, overall, it's okay. Like, it's also this weird thing where this is the first thing I've watched on Amazon that is VHS quality. This is available to stream on Amazon Prime, and it's just straight up VHS quality. Like, there's certain moments, particularly towards the end, where it's just I can tell there is a light somewhere in this scene, and I can't see anything else. So that's fun. But I mean, it kind of lends itself to this kind of like archaeological feel for these kind of forgotten TV movie things that we're doing here with Goldblum, where it's like we have to go back into the archives that Amazon has and watch this forgotten 1982 whodunit. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. Like, it's fine, you know. Like, I kind of to tell my wife I said hello is kind of my reaction.
That's a reference to the neutral people on Futurama, in case anybody's not picking up on that. we haven't said that in a while. Just want to refresh the memories of people.
I forgot. That was a different podcast. You're right.
Yeah, that also was a different podcast. So I'm a little surprised by your reaction, Mike, because I had a really good time with this movie.
Nice.
I had a blast. I really loved just the experience of watching them. And yeah, part of it is that kind of archaeological find aspect of it, being like, oh, this is kind of like a forgotten gem of a movie, sort of. It's got an interesting cast. And it's also, like you said, it does have that VHS quality Amazon Prime stream, which is, you know, a little weird, but it happens sometimes with like these older movies that don't have an HD transfer and stuff like that. Like, it is literally almost definitely ripped from a VHS of this movie from somewhere back in the day. It feels like it's a TV movie for sure. And it has that TV movie production budget, but I think it elevates itself beyond those TV restraints, because I love the way it just pretty much explicitly tells you what it's going to do right at the start. Like, at one point early on in the movie, Robert Preston is like, well, here's how mysteries work. And he like kind of outlines the whole genre, and like, you know, you got to string the audience along, keep them guessing and think they're going one way, and then suddenly you go a different way, and that kind of thing. And then, you know, the movie pretty much explains outright what it's going to do to you. And then it does it, and you're still surprised, I think, by the end. The ending of this movie, like, genuinely surprised me. I was like, oh my God, I got guts. So I love that about it. It made me want to start marathoning episodes of Columbo, honestly, which I've never really watched. I've seen bits of it here and there, but like now that I know, like, these guys, you know, who wrote this movie also created Columbo and wrote many episodes of that show, I'm like, yeah, you know, it seems like a show that I would really just like get into one day. Like, it seems like something that I would just like have a lot of fun just like sitting home alone watching Columbo nonstop. I think that'd be great. That sounds like a perfect Saturday to me.
And honestly, I'm in. Let's do it. I think I just did this movie a disservice by I watched Spike Lee's new movie, Da 5 Bloods, the night before, and then you know, 12 hours later, I'm watching the Rehearsal for Murder while I'm doing work, and like, you know, like the level, the difference in like the impact these two things have, I think is kind of dampened my Rehearsal for Murder reaction, I think, a bit, where I was like, okay, sure, I guess. But Da 5 Bloods, though, you know, preview for our upcoming Mike and Mike episode, I guess. But
yes,
yeah, you know, I think it's hard to like separate that thing, or like, you know, try to take art on its own terms, right? Like, just approach Rehearsal for Murder, but I can't help but think 12 hours later, I was watching, like, you know, something else that is much more impactful to me. And here we are with Rehearsal for Murder.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I really, and I feel like, I mean, you mentioned you were like doing work while you were watching, you were watching this movie, which is unfortunate, but I get it. We're on a schedule and all that stuff, whatever. But I did find myself paying attention to very small details, wondering if they would come back into play in the finale. And a lot of times they did. And I'm curious if you had that reaction, if you were like just looking for stuff throughout. But if you were distracted, then maybe you didn't because you were actually like working and stuff.
Well, I say I'm working, quote unquote, because it's working from home.
Right.
Sure. So like I had my
You're answering an email every once in a
open.
while. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically. Allegedly. I mean, definitely doing a lot of hard work. But yeah, I mean, this movie, it is very fun. Like the whole conceit of like, so, it kind of sets up like, all right, it's Clue, right? Like we're all not exactly, but like, oh, we've gathered everyone here together and we're going to solve the murder. But like the play within a movie thing going on, there's like a whole lot of different layers, and we're having all these people come back, like the cast of this former play, because the writer has written new scenes and he wants to run through them and he needs their help, is like how he convinces them all to meet together. And then, the scenes I want you to play through is like actually me accusing you of doing a murder. And then like there's lots of weird twisty turny stuff within that, and like the different layers and how like it changes between the cast on stage reading a script to like a production of the play that they're reading and stuff. Like it was a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely. So I really enjoyed the movie. But of course, we haven't really talked about Jeff Goldblum yet. What did you think of his role as Leo Gibbs in Rehearsal for Murder? I think he's really good. I really wish he had a lot more to do. I mean, like in the final act, the final 20 minutes, like suddenly he becomes very important.
Sure,
but other than that, he's kind of just like part of the ensemble, hanging out at this theater with some weird reactions going on, basically, and like them scrambling to look for their scene beforehand and all that stuff. So, but I think when he like finally has something to do at the end, he's very good. And his like appearance, I guess, or whatever, like when he first enters the theater and he's like, I became an actor so I can get the spotlight, or whatever he says, which was very fun. And he's kind of like hamming it up a little bit. So yeah. I mean, I think Goldblum is his delightful, charming self that we enjoy in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's very fun. I think you're right. He's very much, just kind of a piece of the ensemble. And as far as the ensemble goes, probably the one that has the least to do for most of the movie. But he is in pretty much the whole thing. Like, even if he's just in like the background of shots, or he's just like doing stuff and like, here and there. And he gets like a lot of like fun, snarky one-liners and things like that. Or he has like a very sarcastic attitude, which is really fun. And, towards the end, he does get, more to do, and he gets more involved in the actual proceedings of the movie. And we'll talk about all that stuff in a little bit. But I thought he was a lot of fun. And he also gets a special appearance by credits in the opening credits. I don't know if you noticed.
I think I did.
In the first scene of the movie, it's Alex has like come to this empty stage. He meets up with Ernie, who's like the caretaker or whatever, and he's like, Ernie, why don't you go across the street and get us some food or whatever? And Ernie's like, okay, Mr. Alex, and he leaves. And then Alex is like kind of just moving around the stage and kind of moving some stuff around, putting some chairs in place, and the credits are rolling, and you see it's Robert Preston and Lynn Redgrave, and then at the very end of the credits, like, with a special appearance by Jeff Goldblum.
What a big draw.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's a little weird because this is 82, so you got to think about where Goldblum is in his career right now. He's still had Body Snatchers a few years ago, which was a big hit, but otherwise, and like he was in a couple other like big movies like Nashville and Annie Hall, but again, very small roles. So as far as like leading stuff that he had been in at this point, it's like 10 Speed and Brown Shoe, which was canceled after 13 episodes, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which which I mean, is what it is. It was a TV movie. It existed for sure. And then Threshold, which hadn't even been released in the US yet at this point, because we talked about it. It was actually released in 83. So it's interesting that Goldblum gets the special appearance by credit, because I feel like if you're looking at the kind of the arc of his career, I feel like the next movie he's in after this is kind of the breakout Jeff Goldblum movie. Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is like the breakout one, but The Big Chill is the one that I think solidifies him as like, all right, he's going to be in movies now, which I guess I just spoiled what the movie is. It's The Big Chill, everybody.
Oh boy.
Whoops. but he is I think he's very good in the movie, and it's cool that he gets that special appearance by credit. I think and Madeline Smith also gets the and credit. It's like Jeff Goldblum and then Madeline Smith as whatever, Karen, I think is her character's name. Mm-hmm. I like analyzing the credits. I like to see what's going on in the behind the scenes world.
That's very. I didn't catch that, and that is very strange for, I guess, a relatively unknown and/or up and coming type person to get that. But I guess especially in a cast like this of like already pretty well established like actors and character actors, it's strange that it's Goldblum that gets it.
Yeah, it's a little strange, but yeah, he's great in the movie. How do you think this role fits in the roles that we've seen Jeff Goldblum play so far, Mike?
I mean, in terms of impact, well, I don't want to say impact, but maybe just like sheer runtime appearance, or however you want to say that, like presence. It feels like a bit of a step back from something like Threshold or Between the Lines or something like that.
Okay,
does that make any sense? Like we said, he kind of is sort of just kind of there in a lot of this movie, and then in the last
he's
act,
present.
Yeah, his presence. I don't. It just feels strange. Well, now I'm thinking about it in the like. In terms of, like I said, his presence, where he's kind of just a present, like he's around, but then in the last 10, 20 minutes, it's like, okay, here he is. Here's Goldblum. He's doing stuff that's as relevant to the plot. Compared to even Sleepy Hollow, which I'm still not convinced it was real, where he's the main character. He's Ichabod Crane. He's in the whole movie.
Yeah, no, I mean. We did talk about Sleepy Hollow for a good, hour or so when we recorded an episode about it. Like,
or is that a memory you implanted? We'll never know.
If you go back and listen to your feed, if you go back and listen to our Sleepy Hollow episode, it's me talking to a robot voice that I use to modulate your own.
God,
that's what it is. It's what's the word? I'm Kaiser Sozeing you.
Yeah, exactly. You're incepting me.
Incepting, yes. But all right. So yeah, I think of all the TV stuff we've seen Goldblum in so far, though, I think this is easily my favorite. But between like 10 Speed and Brown Shoe, Sleepy Hollow, I think this is like easily. I mean, I like 10 Speed and Brown Shoe a lot too. That was a really fun pilot. But this is like a full movie, and it just has like it scratches a lot of the itches that I really appreciate. I also wanted to compare it a little bit to Next Stop Greenwich Village, which he is playing an actor once again in this movie. So it's kind of interesting to see him kind of gravitate towards this role once again, which in this movie, pretty much everyone is like an actor or like a director or somebody involved in the entertainment industry. And Next Time Greenwich Village is a whole like a lot of different mix of different kinds of people all doing different kinds of stuff. Where Goldblum's only in a couple of scenes, and I feel like he's much more of a dick in that movie than he is in this one. But he still has like a lot of the it almost feels like a toned down version of his character from Next Up Greenwich Village a little bit. He's still like kind of snarky, kind of sarcastic. He's has like these like barbs between Karen because they used to date and that kind of thing and all that stuff. So yeah, I think comparing it to that is probably like the most similar role that he's done so far.
Yeah, I could definitely see his character from Rehearsal for Dinner being at an audition and listing his credentials of like, oh yes, I did 3 years at the Actors Studio, and I've once studied under whatever, like basically doing the dialogue from his scene in Next Stop Greenwich Village. Like I could absolutely believe there's a through line between those two characters and what they would behave like at an audition.
Right. Rehearsal for Murder, by the way, you said Rehearsal for Dinner, which
did I say that?
You did say Rehearsal for Dinner, which I mean, there is rehearsal dinners, which 10 Speed had to go to in 10 Speed and Brown Shoe. Maybe that's what your mind is like connecting back to.
Yes. In my mind's conspiracy board, there's a red string between those two things,
and it's crossing out Sleepy Hollow because it comes in between 10 Speed and Brown Shoe in this movie, and that's why Sleepy Hollow doesn't exist. It's all coming together.
My God, Pepe Silva, you're right.
So what are the moments or scenes in Rehearsal for Murder that stood out to you, Mike?
I think well, like I mentioned already, Goldblum's like a rival or whatever, however you want to say that, when he shows up at the theater and they're like, oh, who's the final person? And like, haha, he steps out of the darkness and he's like got this snarky comment about wanting the attention of the whole room or something like that. And it's just like delightfully Goldblum, and he's like, his charming 6'5" self or whatever, however tall he is.
And I agree with that. I think his intro is great, and just kind of throughout, like we mentioned, he kind of gets more stuff to do towards the end, but even throughout, there's just like body language stuff that he has. Like there's one part where they all kind of sit down in their chairs, and Goldblum takes his and turns it backwards. And he's kind of sitting on like a backwards chair. It's like that's fun. That's it's an individualistic touch to his character, which I appreciated. I think the intro scene with Alex and Ernie does a pretty good job of just kind of setting up what's going on. It shows him moving around the stage and you're wondering what's going on. And they say something like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about the news. It was almost a year ago, wasn't it? It's like, yes, a year ago this very week. You know, they play it up very dramatically, and you know, for all the commercial breaks and stuff, there's always like a very like intense line where somebody, you know, that kind of thing. And they show that Alex has a gun, and then there's a very long flashback that sets everything up, where you kind of meet all the characters and kind of establish all the relationships. So you find out, you know, Alex and Monica were in a relationship. Alex goes to the bar during the play where you meet Walter, Mr. Feeney, and all that stuff. And we see Goldblum at the after party with Karen. He's eating a bunch of hors d'oeuvres. It's kind of all you know about Goldblum in that flashback. Yeah, is that he's really into that plate of hors d'oeuvres, which is pretty fun. And then
rehearsal for dinner.
There you go. It's all coming together. And so
I really had to get that drink of water down before I could get that one out.
And so in the flashback, it's clear that you find out the reviews for the play that they're in are going to be bad. Like the premiere of the play was that night. Mr. Feeney's on the phone, like with like the New York Times or whatever, and they're like, "Yeah, the critic hated it. This is going to be rough." And then they don't want to tell Monica that, but Monica wants to be alone that night anyway. Alex gets a strange phone call from Monica in the middle of the night, and like the phone hangs up suddenly, and so he rushes over there, and she has been found dead. Her death is ruled a suicide because she jumped from her window and left a note that said, "I'm sorry, but it's better this way." So that's kind of like the setup of the movie. It kind of takes up the first 10-15 minutes. And then from there, most of the movie takes place in like one big room, like one big kind of stage like production thing. And there's like cutaways and stuff that you kind of mentioned before, where like every time they read a new scene, it establishes it in a new location, which is pretty cool. And there's like one meta joke about that too at one point, where like somebody's like, they mentioned they're about to read the second scene. It's like, this one's set in an art gallery. And Mr. Feeney's like, "Oh, more sets. This thing's getting expensive, Alex." Or that kind of thing. And then it cuts to another new set, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so all that stuff. I mean, the intro, like the setup, like as everything was going on, like up through the point where you see Monica dying, or you don't see Monica dying, but you found out Monica died. What'd you think of all that, Mike? And I mean, obviously you knew there was going to be some kind of murderer involved because it's a whodunit. The movie's called Rehearsal for Murder. But just the setup, the intro, getting everything established. What'd you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it makes more sense knowing that these are like the COLUMBO guys. And not that, like you said, I'm in the same situation as you. Like, I've never, like, you know, watched all of COLUMBO, but like I've seen an episode and like I understand that it's like a mystery of the week kind of detective story thing. Like, I understand the trappings of that. And this kind of just feels like an extended, like, feature length version of something along those lines. So it's fine. Like, it does all the things you expect it to do, and you want it to like set up what's going on. And I like TV movies are such a weird thing that I want us to talk about eventually at some point in this episode. But like the conventions of like having to build to a commercial break in a feature length whodunit stuff. And there's some really funny ones. There was one off I'll get to later, I think, where at least like he established, I think it's the line where he's like, "One of you did the murder." And then like it just plays like a musical sting with a close up at everybody's face. It's like, we have to establish who all the characters are. And it's like bing, bing, like, you know, little chords. Hilarious. Loved it. Love every second of it. Or like when he pulls the gun and it's like, and then like cut to commercial. Very funny. But yeah, the first 10-15 minutes it's doing the thing, and then we kind of all gather here at this stage for the playwright to run through. I like the clever name now that it's like, oh, they're there to rehearse scenes from a play and also solve a murder. It's a rehearsal for murder.
Yep, it has a lot of double meanings, and we're going to even get some more of those meanings later on in this episode, I think, because I really want to dig into. I love the way this movie plays out. I really do. We'll be talking about it as it happens, kind of just running down. So we go to present day, and Alex is there, and he's setting up, and Ernie comes back with the food. He sends Ernie home for the day, and we see a guy up in the rafters, and they're like, "Oh, they're coming, right?" And he's like, "Yep, they're coming." Blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And then one by one, everyone arrives. So there's Karen, Madeline Smith, who used to date Jeff Goldblum's character. Walter and Lloyd. Walter is the financier of the play, the producer. Lloyd was the director. Goldblum shows up, who is also an actor in the play. And David, who is the lead of the play, the male lead. He's the guy that's played by the guy from the Avengers, not the Marvel Avengers, but the old British TV show, which eventually had a movie also, the one with Sean Connery, which is quite a film. If you've ever seen the Sean Connery Avengers movie, he spends a decent chunk of that movie in a giant bear suit. It's a fun time.
Incredible.
So Alex reveals to this group, it's a year after they all basically seen each other, that he started writing a new play, wants the group's input, and has written scenes for each of them. A murder mystery, and he kind of runs down the rules of the murder mystery, and he's talking about how, in a mystery you have to lead the audience to this place, and then at some point you have to take that away from them and show them, oh, you were going this way the whole time, and that kind of thing. And he kind of outlines the idea of what a murder mystery is, basically so they know, and also like the audience at home knows how a murder mystery works, so that when this movie does it, you almost feel flabbergasted that it was did it, it seems like it's leading that way one way, and then suddenly it goes in an entirely different direction, and I think it works really well. But so he explains what a murder mystery is. He runs down the play. It's called Killing Jessica, and it's very clearly, from the outset, a very thinly veiled stand-in for Monica.
Don't they at one point, doesn't he say Monica by accident, quote unquote?
Yes.
Accident? At some
right,
point.
yeah, he says Monica by accident, and even when he's just describing the character Jessica, it's she was an actress who used to work in movies, but she was embarrassed by her work, and so she came to New York to be a stage actress, and it's the exact same backstory that Monica had in quote unquote real life in this movie. So everybody's that sounds very familiar, Alex. They all seem like they're a little suspicious of the whole thing right away, but they go along with it and stuff like that. There's also one great line where somebody says something about flesh and blood in relation to the murder mystery, and Alex is I don't know about the flesh, but I can guarantee the blood. Which is, just a really cool, fun line. But so the first one we see is David reading his scene, the British guy. And that's where you first, you're in the empty stage room, and then suddenly, the camera kind of pans over, and suddenly you're in a full set. You're in a full living room set. And I thought that was a really cool technique that they used to do that. And it's basically just a scene of him talking to Monica. He's basically accused of making a pass at Monica at some point, and her storming off, and that's why he killed her. So that scene happens, and then Lloyd reads his scene, which is at the art gallery with Monica, and he's accused of having a relationship with her. And then after that is when everybody's okay, come on, man. What's going on here? So those first two scene readings, Mike, what were your thoughts on those? How it kind of moved into these new sets, and how Monica just sort of arriving, and he was kind of reading her lines through her kind of thing. Yeah,
I thought that was a really neat little device they're doing. I can't remember if it's which one it is, but there's one where it's the scene opens with a knock, and then it's somebody knocking on a door, and then it zooms out to reveal that we're in a set now, or in an apartment, or wherever it is. And I think that's fun. That's a cool little way to change it up, instead of it just being everyone in this one room reading scripts, basically. Yeah, I thought that was a fun little device, and the cutting back and forth a couple times. I feel I remember there being a couple of moments where someone has a comment, and we cut back to the stage, and then well, okay, we'll keep going, and they cut back to to the set, and they do the thing. Yeah, so it's a fun little goofy device that we've got here, where we're kind of unraveling this mystery through this play, but we're actually seeing the play in the movie in the play. I don't it's right. It's a little it's hard to explain, but it makes perfect sense while you're watching it.
At one point, they do compare it to Hamlet, also the play within a play, in an attempt to try to catch the killer, which I thought was a fun little nod to it. Where I thought that actually a few minutes before they said it, I was this seems kind of familiar, and then they brought it up. I was okay, there it is. But yeah, after those first two scene readings, Walter, Mr. Feeney, I was going to say Mr. Feeney the entire time. Yeah. Mr. Feeney calls out Alex. They all argue, and he kind of begrudgingly reads his scene, where he's basically accused of killing Monica for the insurance money, because he was the producer of the play. It was going to be a bomb, and he stood to gain money if it didn't end up happening, or there was some kind of accident. And it's at that point where they start analyzing what's going on, and that's the big commercial break which you were talking about, where they cut to all their faces, and Robert Preston's we have to solve the answer of one question. It's and what question is that, Alex? Which one of you killed Monica Wells? And all the faces, which was really great. That's also the scene with Goldblum's backwards chair, which is also great. Right. And then at that point, you come back from commercial, which on Amazon Prime you don't get the commercials, which is a bummer. I feel I have enjoyed watching these TV movies just for kind of interesting worldview of I don't have a lot of experiences watching old 80s TV movies, and so this is kind of cool. But I think I would like it if they had the original commercials intact while watching them, just to really have that feeling of watching the movie at that time, which I remember we watched Sleepy Hollow on YouTube, and one of the versions of it did have the commercials. The one we watched didn't, but like it is up there. And I think this is also available on YouTube somewhere, but we watched this on Amazon Prime, so I don't know if the YouTube version may have them. Who knows? But in any case, this one's without commercials. And I mean, it worked. It probably is better for the flow of the movie for it not to have commercials, but it is fun to just like have it cut to a commercial break and then just immediately be back.
Yeah, I'm going to choose to believe each commercial break is just the Cheddar Goblin commercial for Mandy, and then comes back to continue rehearsal for murder.
Exactly. So when they come back from commercial, Karen tries to leave. She is like, I've had enough of this. I don't want to read my scene. I'm done. I can't believe you're accusing us of this. She tries to leave, and then McElroy stops her. Right, so McElroy reveals himself and stops Karen from leaving, and he's the guy who's up in the rafters at the beginning of the movie that Alex was talking to, like making sure they don't leave. And so he's like supposed to be the lieutenant they had all talked to after the death of Monica, like after it happened, and gave their statements to and everything. And so he reveals himself and stops her from leaving, and then the moving guys arrive to bring in a set for the last scene, and they all move to the dressing room. So at this point, David borrows a lighter from McElroy, and that's going to come into play later in the movie. And it is one of those things that felt like a very deliberate, like I mentioned before, I was looking for small details that might play into the finale, and that was one of them. But it didn't play into like I didn't expect it to go down the way it did. Basically, David borrows the lighter from McElroy, and then they go to the downstairs thing, and it turns out, twist, it's not the real McElroy.
Eventually, yes.
So this McElroy, they say, was killed in the line of duty 6 months ago, which everyone takes that news really well.
Yeah.
They kind of just blow right past that. Like, McElroy was killed 6 months ago on his police officer job. This man is an actor. He's an imposter. And nobody reacts to the McElroy dying news, which I thought was very funny. But the guy pretending to be McElroy was actually an out-of-work actor named Frank Heller. Alex hired him and told Frank who murdered Monica and basically had him there as like guard standby kind of thing. So basically you learn there that like, oh, Alex actually already knows who killed Monica, and this is a whole elaborate ruse to just get it out of them kind of thing. Right. Whatever, because Frank tells him that, he told me who killed Monica and that kind of thing. So what did you think of this whole reveal, this whole twist that McElroy was not actually McElroy, it was this guy Frank, who, by the way, is Corey's dad from Boy Meets World.
Right, yeah. I thought it was pretty fun, especially the moment like leading up to it when the British guy's like, I never forget a face or whatever. He's got like this big like confrontation thing where he realized like, where he says like, you're not, I remember what McElroy looked like. And then that kind of like twisty turny reveal of like, well, actually he's being offered $10,000 to pretend to be a cop to get the other real killer to confess. Because now there's a cop here, and like all this weird shit. Yeah, I mean it's fun. I don't dislike this movie. I just was not completely engaged with it. I think, like I said, so like I think it's fun, twisty turny, and like pulpy shit. Like it's just tropey stuff. But like I'm here for that, man. Like that's fun. It was fun. It's fun. Mistaken identities. Who doesn't like it?
Sure. And I mean, this movie goes to some ludicrous places, I think. And this is only like the first of that kind of stuff. But like they kind of established like, oh, he's actually a lookalike of McElroy. You couldn't even tell. Like all that stuff. And so basically that's all revealed. But Alex says no one leaves till we're finished. And he pulls out the gun that he had at the beginning of the movie and kind of forces Karen and Jeff Goldblum to read their scene, which is together. And basically that scene is basically accusing Karen and Goldblum, Leo, of poisoning Monica so that Karen would get her part.
Karen, didn't know you had company. Hi, Mark.
Hi. This is private, Leo.
No, come on in, Leo. The three of us could have a little talk.
About what?
Well, pick a subject. Opening nights, doing a favor for an intimate friend.
What? Huh?
Going to medical school? You did go, didn't you, for a few years? I imagine you had courses in chemistry.
Well, that was a long time ago. Why? What's this all about?
She knows.
That's what?
About that. She had it analyzed.
Oh, brother.
Okay, look, we spiked your tea, but it wouldn't have harmed you. Just would have slowed you down for tonight. The question is, what are you going to do?
I told you it was crazy. You wouldn't listen.
Be quiet,
I
Leo.
put people in jail for something
Be
like this.
quiet.
That happens, and I mean, this is like kind of when Jeff Goldblum starts to become more of the focus of the movie a little bit. So what did you think of that whole scene reading? Like, did you think that was a plausible ending of the movie? At this point, I was pretty convinced Jeff Goldblum was the killer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially there was actually a funny moment too, way early, like 20 minutes earlier in the movie, when the moving people arrive. And he's like, yes, they have the set for the grand finale, and like, we're gonna do our final act or something. Or as he goes to meet the moving people. And I was like, wait a second, and this movie's almost over? Like, what? And I paused the movie, and there's like 45 minutes left, and I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, oh, man, we had a real quick one, like real barn burner here. Here we go. Nope. But anyway, I mean, that last scene where they're like, trying to give her grandma's herbal tea or whatever the hell they're calling it, and with the drugs in it to like go put her to sleep. I forget what she kind of like wants to drink it. I don't remember exactly the whole situation. But then you overdosed her basically, and she died. So you could get her part. And there's the moment kind of after that scene where they're kind of confronting Goldblum, confronting his Leo with like the evidence that it was him. That was really intense, and like I was like fully like, hell yeah, this is the scene. I was thinking that it was the moment in Knives Out, like at the very end when he went, it's the detective putting together all the pieces for the audience to explain how we know what we know, kind of thing. And I was really into that last scene with Goldblum when it's revealed that like their alibis don't quite line up, and he left the house for an hour in the middle of the night because he wanted to go for a walk. And I was like, oh no, like what is it? Not our boy Goldblum.
Yeah, and I mean the moment like after they read the scene, they go back up there and all of Monica's furniture is there. There's a moment where Karen asks Karen to move a chair or something, and she like can't move it, so Goldblum goes and moves it for her or something. And at that moment I was like, oh man, that's going to come into play. And then it does, and it's like Karen couldn't even move that chair. How could she have done this or whatever, and like stuff like that. So it like during the scene reading, it seems like it might be like, oh, Karen and Goldblum might have been working together to kill Monica, and then at that point, you're like, oh man, it was just Goldblum working on his own. He used to go to med school. He knows how to do this kind of stuff and stuff like that. The chemical sample was real. Goldblum was gone for an hour. So he tries to escape. Goldblum is like, I'm out of here. This bird's got to fly. And he runs.
Shit, man. Got business. Which is a solid episode 1 reference.
Episode 1, Death Wish, way back in 1974. That's been 8 years since Death Wish came out, Mike. As far as this podcast is concerned. But yeah, so Alex shoots at him. He has the gun and he's like shooting, and the lights go out. And there's like kind of firing blindly. And at this point, it's like total chaos. It's very confusing. And I was very confused as to what was happening at this point, because he's firing blindly. And I'm like, people must be getting shot. like somebody in that room must be getting shot. And then Frank pulls out a flashlight, and then the lights come back on. And then Goldblum's like up there with them all. And it turns out, twist, Goldblum wasn't the killer after all. Frank, the guy who is impersonating the cop that Alex hired to be there to oversee everyone, he was the one that killed Monica. And not only that, they all knew it. This whole thing was an elaborate ruse. Everything in the movie was a complete lie.
Yep.
to get Frank to reveal that he was the one that killed Monica. It blew my mind, Mike.
That moment, because at this point, like you said, it's complete chaos. I have no idea what's going on, and like you said, the lights are out. There's just the gun going off like crazy, and then Frank has the flashlight, and he's like, "I got like where like talk to me. Where is everybody? Where is he?" And I thought like the lights were gonna come on, and they were just like all gonna be dead. Like they just all got shot because he's calling out to the room and nobody's answering.
Right.
It's like, what the fuck is this movie? What is happening? But yeah, then they're all kind of just standing there looking at him in like that kind of like after school special sort of way. Like, we're not mad, we're just disappointed. Like they're just all in a line looking at him with their arms crossed. And then the real McElroy shows up, which is wild.
Yes. Yeah, the real McElroy shows up at the end, and it turns out he wasn't killed in the line of duty at all. Everything they said that as like a statement of fact throughout the movie was a complete lie. Like, and they even bring that up. Like, I never went to med school. Me and Karen never dated. Like, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Never, like, none of it happened. But yeah, the reason they knew like Frank implicated himself in the murder is because he. Like they asked, like, "Hey, where'd you get that flashlight, Frank?" And he's like, it was just around." And he's like, "It was in like," and he knew the flashlight was in the dresser drawer of Monica's old room because when he went over there and killed Monica, he was like shuffling through the doors and like saw a flashlight there or whatever. And so like, I got it from the drawer. And it's like, you knew it was in that specific drawer, didn't you? And they're like, "No, I didn't." It's like, "Yes, you did, because I locked all the other ones."
Yeah.
And he tries to open all the other drawers and it can't work. And it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not sure I would remember if I saw a flashlight in a drawer a year ago in a dresser. Yeah. But I was really into the twist. Like it all worked for me. It's like just ludicrous enough where I was like, I'm on board. This is great. I
mean, you were talking about small details that like the lighter, which I'm sure we'll explain in a second. But the fact before like the realization of that Frank was the murderer and that's why he knew there was a light there, I was like, what a weird detail to come back, because in the flashback in the very beginning, Alex, the main dude, opens the thing, like is like kind of making fun of her for having the flashlight in her dresser. And like, what's going to happen? The power going to go out? And then she's like, well, you never know, just in case. And then the power goes out and there's a flash like it came into play. And I was like, what a weird fucking thing. And then it's like, oh, he's the murderer and he saw that when he killed her and that's why he knows it's there. And I was like, okay, there's a reason for it. Yep. But I was like, what a weird setup to pay off for this movie.
And I loved like after that, when he realizes like he's screwed, David's like, oh, by the way, here's your lighter back.
Yeah.
After he borrowed it from before and never gave back to him, was like, it's like this whole thing could have been avoided for Frank if he didn't give away the lighter. But there,
and he even says that, like, we couldn't take the chance of you having another light.
It's perfect. So yeah, everything in the movie was a lie. It turns out Frank had an affair with Monica before she died, and she was breaking it off that night, tried to like pay him off, and he kind of pushed her into the corner of her dresser, and that's how she died. And so he kind of staged it to look like a suicide. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. Just like, and again, like the way the movie kind of led you to believe, like the movie outright said to you, hey, the killer is someone in this room. One of you killed Monica Wells. And then it cuts to commercial, right? And it shows all those faces. Doesn't show Frank. Does not show Frank, which is why I think it worked so effectively for me, was that, like, you know, I wasn't even considering Frank as an option. Like, he's the one guy in the room I wasn't considering as the guy who would have killed Monica Wells. And it turns out he was. And it was pretty great. I was pretty into it.
Yeah. I think as with a lot of these episodes, you usually talk me into enjoying this movie more. And I really do think that if I had watched this first and then watched The Five Bloods, I would have liked it a lot more. Which I guess stay tuned for our episode of Mike and Mike Go to the Movies to hear my thoughts on that.
Fair enough. But yeah, so Frank is pulled away by the real McElroy, and there's a bit where he, like, hey, this guy looks nothing like me. And it's like, well, yeah, we all know what McElroy looks like, but you didn't. So it all.
And then, like, they all laugh, and then roll credits, basically.
There's also a great line where it's like there's just one thing I don't understand, Columbo or Alex. And it's like, what? Like, he knew he killed Monica. Why did he come and take this job? Right. And Alex is like, well, he's an actor, and I was offering him a wonderful part. It's just great. Big fan. So they all go for drinks, and Alex kind of takes a minute. He kind of like is, you know, kind of surveying the room a little bit, finally at peace with what happened, and kind of clinks the two champagne glasses, and then the movie ends. It kind of freeze frames on the champagne glasses, and then the credits roll. Yeah,
it almost has the ending that Oh Hello, right? I think is the name of the special, where it's like, waiter, I'll have 2 root beers or whatever the hell it is, 2 Pepsis, yes. I think. That like basically ruined the ending of every play ever for me, because that's all I can think about anytime anything ends on like a semi-aspirational line of dialogue.
Sure. That's fair. And this movie did begin as a play. Like, it was written as a play originally and then became a TV movie. So, yeah, there you go. But yeah, that's Rehearsal for Murder. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And Mike, it sounds like you thought it was okay. Maybe would have liked it a little more if you had watched it first instead of The Five Bloods. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, like it's perfectly fine. You know, like it's okay.
Should we move on to some letterbox reviews, Mike?
Wait, real quick. The concept of a television movie is wild to me, and I can't believe they don't exist anymore. And I kind of wish they did. And I think the closest modern thing we have to it is a Netflix original movie, which doesn't really count because it doesn't capture the like weird small budget feature thing that TV movies have. And it's wild that there was just a time where there was so little content they had to make movies to fill an hour and a half time slot on a network television channel. So yeah, that's my thing about TV movies, and I guess Lifetime movies technically are a thing.
Yeah, like, I mean they're still out there, but I think you're right. Where it's not like they're not building towards commercial breaks anymore because most of them happen on either Netflix or HBO will do their own like HBO movies and things like that. But as far as like networks go, like NBC, ABC, Fox, they really don't do like the TV movies anymore. They were still doing them, I think, up until like the 2000s. Like I think there was less of them, but they were still happening every once in a while. Like I feel like I remember hearing about TV movies or whatever that would air on the networks. But yeah, I think they've kind of shifted away from that just because they're a little expensive to make. They don't have a ton of rerun value, I think, for networks, especially. And it's easier for a network to make something like The Masked Singer or something and just run that, like, you know, do 3 seasons of that a year. And, you know, it's cheaper for them to produce and all that stuff. And it fills up a lot of time for them. And it's probably a bigger ratings draw. But yeah, but it is like a little bit of a lost art, the TV movie. And also, I mean, back in like the 60s, they would do like TV stage productions and things like that. Like there was just stuff like that they would used to do because they had nothing, like they had like, you know, a certain amount of shows that they would air at certain times. And then that was it. They needed other things to fill in the airwaves. So that was, the TV movie, which I think there's at least one more TV movie coming at us in the next couple of episodes. And then I think after that, Goldblum kind of takes a break from the TV movie stuff for a while. So there's one more in the can. I think in 1984 is when that comes up. So a couple of movies away. That's a tease for the next couple of episodes of the Complete Works podcast. But all right, let's move on into letterbox reviews, Mike. Here's a 4-star review from Beef, which reads, a super enjoyable movie of the week style whodunit that felt like it could have been an episode of Columbo, which is probably because the guys who wrote this also did some writing for, wait for it, Columbo. Anyway, you got all the hallmarks of the genre, all the suspects in one location, flashbacks, red herrings, and of course, a nice twist at the end. Here's a 3.5-star review from Ben Starkey, which is just I'm gonna clap along with the clap emojis as it happens. It goes to boy meets world actors.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's the whole review. I think just that alone, 3.5 stars right there. Solid stuff. Here's another one. The return of a letterbox reviewer from last week, The Poetic Critic. It's a 4-star review, and I believe it's a haiku. It says, from TV Movie Land, immersive murder mystery in more ways than one. That's it.
That's it? Okay, yeah.
That's the... anytime I'm going to see a review from the Poetic Critic, maybe they reviewed every Jeff Goldblum movie and we can keep working them in there.
I hope so. I hope it's a recurring bit.
It's so weird that the movies they reviewed so far that we found are Threshold and Rehearsal for Murder, which are movies that not a lot of people have seen.
Yeah, I'm gonna enjoy the Poetic Critic as a recurring character in our audience review section much more than, was it Temperance Virgin Ears from the Nicolas Cage Complete Works, who is always just so mad about the level of swearing in all of his movies.
Yes. And at a certain point, it's like, stop watching them. What are you doing? All right, I have a couple more reviews here. Here's a 4-star from A.A. Sheps, which reads, one of the great stories. Art house Agatha Christie, multi-layered actor's dream, simply marvelous as a stage play. One day, I shall remake this. I hope he does. One day. Yeah,
hopefully. Good for
I hope
them.
A.A. Sheps gets there and to do a Rehearsal for Murder remake one day. It's something to aspire to. Here's the final one, a 4-star review from Minion Max, which reads, you won't find me arguing that Rehearsal for Murder is the world's most complicated murder mystery, but leave it to the writers of Columbo to come up with a whodunit this delightful and charming. A mystery is only as strong as its reveal, and this throws in enough clever twists and turns beyond the mere identity of the killer that definitely left me satisfied. Rehearsal for Murder sits comfortably alongside The Last of Sheila as paragons of vintage Western mysteries. And there you go. The Last of Sheila, by the way, is a movie I've heard is incredible, and it's one of those things that I can't find anywhere. I've tried. I think the only place to like legally watch The Last of Sheila is on Turner Classic Movies, where sometimes they play it. But otherwise, it's like very difficult to find. There's no like Netflix disc or anything like that. So it's like never streaming anywhere. So, but I've heard it's incredible. It's like one of Edgar Wright's favorite movies, which I think is why I've heard about it a few times. But yeah,
probably.
So there you go. That is Rehearsal for Murder, the Jeff Goldblum whodunit movie, which made me really want Ryan Johnson to cast Jeff Goldblum in Knives Out too. Actually, I feel like that would be incredible. That'd be so much fun. But all right, I think that about does it for today, Mike. So where can we find you online this week?
You can find me at MD Film Blog on Twitter and Letterboxd.
And you can find me at M Smith Film Blog on Twitter, Mike Smith Film on Letterboxd, and Radio Mike Sandwich on Instagram. Thanks for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That's Mike DeCrescio. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast app. And if you want to contact us, hit us up at jeffgoldblumcompleteworks@gmail.com. And you can find the rest of our podcasts on Rapture Press alongside the Review Zoo, a podcast about comic books and movie news and all that nerdy stuff. There's also a podcast on there called Kickstart My about various Kickstarter projects that are in the works. So you can check that out too. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at GoBloomPod. Our theme song was created by Kyle Cullen, who you can reach for your own podcast themes at kylespodcastthemes@gmail.com. And our logo was designed by Jacob Honeycutt or at Jacob Honey on Twitter. Join us next week on The Complete Works, where Goldblum returns to the big screen in what immediately hit as a baby boomer classic. We are talking Lawrence Kasdan's 1983 movie, The Big Chill, which Mike doesn't like that much.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm eager to see what you think of it this time around. I've seen it once and I liked it quite a bit. But I remember, I think you watched it like a year ago or something like that for the podcast, or you watched it as like a discussion, and you just weren't all that taken with it. So yeah, very curious to see where you lie now that you watched it a second time. Who knows? Who's to say?
Time will tell.
Time will tell. And our next Mike and Mike will see us talking Defy of Bloods, the movie that ruined this movie for Mike. It's the new Spike Lee joint, which just hit Netflix this past weekend. Go watch that if you haven't yet. It is pretty fantastic. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys. And remember to go for the Goldblum. A lot. God, I just had a lot of chicken parmesan before we
that'll do it.
Started this.